Alright, so this is our next unit, Phylum Echinodermata. This will be pretty quick. There's a couple of classes we need to go through. Most of our time will be spent on Seastar structure and function. It comes from the Latin root meaning spiny skin, and these are, again, something most people would recognize as animals. So when we're talking about Phylum Echinodermata, there are four things we're really going to look at. Sea stars, sea urchins, sea cucumbers, and something called a brittle star. Now, each of them belongs to their own classes, and we'll go through the details of each. Now, put a circle around this or highlighted box because I'm going to ask this at some point. They all have a water vascular system as their key feature. So we're going to do that thing where we put a sort of a branching out, starting with Phylum Mollusca, and then going out to our four classes, but each one of them will have the water vascular system. Now, this is an issue because this is the first time where we cannot see something from the outside. Everything else we've been able to see, segmented body parts with the worms, pores and collar cells with the sponges. And this one, you're going to have to cut open to see what's on the inside. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But for now, we're going to have to look at some external characteristics. Now, obviously, you know what a starfish looks like. So, I mean, it's pretty easy to recognize, oh, okay, that's a starfish and, belongs to Phylum Echinodermata. But really what you're looking for is the external characteristic of having tube feet. And the tube feet they're going to use for movement and feeding. Now, why are the tube feet something we look at? That's because the tube feet are connected to the water vascular system. And they look something like this. So they come out from underneath the arms of the sea star in this case, and they're even on sea urchins. Now, the best way to take a look at this is to actually see it in a video. And somebody sent this to me. And in this video, you can see there's a sea star here on the beach, and the tube feet right here are grabbing onto the sand. Now, this is hooked up to the water vascular system on the inside of the starfish. And this is actually one of the better videos that somebody's sent me. I mean, I think this gives you a really good look of how it's using those tube feet for movement. And they all use it for movement. Sea stars, sea urchins, sea cucumbers, again, all of them are using it for movement, and they're going to use it for feeding as well. Just know that it's connected to the water vascular system. So we'll get more into the water vascular system a little bit later on. And it looks something like this. Again, you're going to get a nice, clean cartoon image. Over here we have where the water goes in. This thing's called a plate, and it goes down this thing called the stone canal and the ring canal. And it fills up these things called the radial canal, and then these little balloon-like structures called the ampulla, and then into the tube feet, and it squishes the water out, and then it pops out of the bottom. And that's what you were looking at in the video, those things that were sticking out. That was this number 8 right here, popping out of the bottom of the arm. Of course, when you actually open something up, it doesn't look anything like that. So this is a sea star that's been opened up a little bit. Over here is that weird thing called the stone canal I talked about. This over here is the ring canal. You can kind of tell there's a ring structure, and then it's going to send it down the radial canal, so on and so on. But we'll spend some time taking a look at this in the lab. All right, what about symmetry? Because we always talk about symmetry. This one has a new one that we've never seen before. It's actually the only one that has this type of symmetry. And this is called Pentamerous Symmetry, like pentagon, meaning it comes in 5 parts. And you can see that with sea stars. Any sea star you look at come usually with 5 arms, but they come typically in multiples of 5. So 5, 10, 20. Brittle stars, again, also come with pentamerous symmetry. Here, sea urchins, if you knocked off all the spines, they also have pentamerous symmetry. The red one here is probably the easiest one to see. Even the green one, clearly there are 5 parts to that. Even these sand dollars, so if you don't know, sand dollars are related to sea stars. They have pentamerous symmetry, so a little starlight shape on them. And even these guys right here. So these guys, if you were to look at them at the mouth, not from the outside, but these also have pentamerous symmetry. These are called sea cucumbers. All right, what about reproduction? In terms of reproduction, they all reproduce sexually. So you have male sea stars, female sea stars. But this one can also reproduce asexually. The thing that I want you to note is that it's not done intentionally. It's not like they want to reproduce asexually. It's just that it happens. And what do I mean by that? They typically regenerate lost body parts. And that's not necessarily asexual reproduction in and of itself. But if they lose an arm, they can grow the arm back. So something like this, if the arms get chopped off, well, they can grow 2 new ones. But here's where asexual reproduction comes in with the sea stars. What happens to the chopped arms? Well, the chopped arms can grow into their own individual sea star. So if something comes along and tears off an arm and that arm falls off, it can make a copy of itself. It's a copy of the original. Like, this is an exact copy of the original, but it's not like the sea stars go out and lose their arms on purpose. It's just, it happens by accident. So for the most part, they reproduce asexually, intentionally, and they reproduce asexually by accident. And so here's just a couple of other looks. So here's one where it's lost 2 of the arms and it's growing them back. Well, what happened to the other 2 arms? Well, those other arms are growing into their own tiny little sea stars. And these are considered, for the most part, pests in most cases because they eat bivalves. They go and eat clams and oysters, which typically people are trying to harvest. And so what they used to do is they used to pull them out of the water, chop them up, and then throw them back in. And well, guess what? They would regrow into 5 more, or however many more. The thing that's important is the center part right here is called the central disc, and we'll get to this later. But so long as a piece of the central disc is on this cut piece, it will grow into a brand new sea star. All right, so what's the deal with this water vascular system? Basically, it's a network of canals. It's just one tube going to another. And they're going to use this for movement, just like you saw in the video, for feeding, and they're also going to use it as a basic circulatory system. They don't have blood like the earthworm did or some of the other organisms we've looked at. Typically, they're passing their nutrients, oxygen, through the water that they're passing through the water vascular system. And if we were to strip away like the gonads and the stomach and the digestive glands, if we were to take that all out, what we would see is something like this. Again, just a series of canals connected to each other. Or something like this. The madpride is a thing called a plate, stone canal, ring canal, like I mentioned. Again, it's not going to look this clean, but it's just a way to show you. And they all have it. If you take a look here at a sea urchin, so here's this thing called a plate, stone canal. There's the ring canal. It has its own tube feet right here. Even the sea cucumber, again, it has a plate, so that's this right here. It goes to the ring canal. The ring canal eventually sends it into the tube feet. So they all have it. So after this, we're going to start talking about the classes here. The first class we're going to take a look at is one called Asteroidea. Now, this one includes your typical starfish. You can call them starfish if you want. Sea stars, probably more accurate because it's not a fish. And these guys mostly eat bivalves. Now, how do you know you're looking at a sea star versus a brittle star? Well, for Asteroidea, they usually have these really thick arms that are connected right at the central disc. And there's going to be 3 California native sea stars that you're going to need to know. We'll sketch these later. You can pause it and sketch them if you want, but we'll do this a little bit later on. So this one's called the Ochre Star. If you notice right here, again, really thick triangular arms right around the central disc, basically just the middle part right here. So again, really thick arms that are connected to one another right here with the central disc. So they have this middle part here, arms connected to each other. This is called the bat star. This is Pycnopodia. This is called the sunflower star. That's my hand right there. These are huge. They're probably about the size of your desk. This is a baby one. You can go out to the beach, catch them, hold them. They're actually kind of soft. And these guys have about 20 arms on them, but they're all connected to one another. So if you take a look, again, they're all connected to the central disc. The mouth is on the bottom part right here. You can see the mouth right there. This is what they look like from the top. We'll do a video on Seastar Movement. We'll come back to that later. Class Ophiuroidea. These are brittle stars. Now, if you're going to have problems, it's going to be because you're having trouble telling the difference between a brittle star and a sea star. These guys eat plankton. They don't eat bivalves. They're actually really, really small, really, really thin. And that's how you recognize them, by these thin arms that are not connected to one another. So the 2 you're going to have to know is the spiny brittle star and the deep brittle star. So take a look here. So like right here, The arms are really thin. This is probably the better one to look at. Look at how thin the arms are, and they're not connected to one another. So again, they are not connected to each other. So I'm going to go back here to our Ochre Star. If you look, again, the arms are clearly connected to one another. Clearly connected, clearly connected. These guys are not. Their arms are separated. There's a gap. The central disc creates a gap somewhere in between the arms where you can see that gap, like right here. We'll watch one on a Brittle Star Movement. We'll come back to that. Class Echinodea, this includes sea urchins. These can be eaten. This also includes sand dollars. If you don't know, sand dollars are alive. Sand dollars feed on plankton. Sea urchins typically feed on kelp, things like bull kelp, giant kelp. And the key feature for these guys is a complete calcium outer skeleton. So I probably should have mentioned that over here. You probably saw it. The key feature for Asteroidea are those thick arms that are connected to the central disc. The key feature for Ophiuroidea are the thin arms not connected to one another. And for class Echinodea, it's a complete calcium outer skeleton. And the three you're going to have to know is the purple sea urchin, the red sea urchin, and eccentric sand dollar. These are pretty easy. Purple sea urchin, obviously purple. Red sea urchin, obviously red. And then your sand dollar. All the sand dollars here in California are basically the same. And then the last one is class Holothuroidea. Now these include these weird things called sea cucumbers, and they eat detritus. Basically, they just shovel in sand and all the dead material that's, old poop, dead bodies that are lingering inside the sand, and they filter that out. They're like vacuum cleaners. The key feature here is they're tube-like. So in addition, first, they all have to have the water vascular system. Second is you look at the class's key feature. And the two that you're going to have to know for our California natives are the Warty sea cucumber. And you can tell because it has these little black spots on these little warts all over the place. And you have to know the giant sea cucumber. Now these guys, if you notice, there are no black spots on it. So again, Warty sea cucumber, black spots. Giant sea cucumber, no black spots. All right, and that's the end of notes part 1 for Phylum Echinodermata.